Amen. We were in GC 308 paragraph 2 this morning. We turned to Luke 21, if you recall. And we saw that verses 29 and 30 were a parable. And that parable was essentially a repeat and enlarge, or an explanation of the verses that had preceded it. And you can essentially find that same parable in both Matthew and Mark. It's Matthew 24, verse 32. And Mark 13 verse 28. Both of them deal with the subject of this fig tree. And then verse 31 of Luke, and again you can check the parallel passages in the other two Gospels, is an explanation of that parable 29 to 30. So we came to the conclusion that verse 27 is the end of that vision, or the prophecy, and verse 28 is a summary of that. When you see these things come to pass, just want to make sure we are clear on this. When it says in verse 28, and when these things begin to come to pass, then look up, lift up your heads, redemption draweth nigh. Why are we only tying that back to verse 25? Sister Tess? That's what you wanted to do, I believe. Why are you only tying that back to 25, not further back into the prophecy?
This is when he brings up the signs.
Explain a little bit more.
In verse 25, and there shall be signs in the sun and moon, he's bringing in the concept of signs.
And how are you tying that back to verse 28?
Verse 28 says, when these things, and then begin to come to pass, it's marking the commencement of these things, which must be the signs listed.
It must be?
I think so.
Anyone else? Why must it be 25? Why are you not able to go further back? Verse 24, 23. Brother Graham?
Because in verse 32 it says this generation. And that's repeated in large.
So you're going to use this generation to be your evidence? Anyone else? Or Larry?
I'd say because of verse 25 talks about the signs. And those signs are 1780, 1833, 1830, 1840.
I think you said something similar to Sister Tess. So we've got those signs. How do we know that's where we should be beginning these things?
I've referred to those things would be the sign.
Anyone else?
Verse 24 is marking the end of a period of time.
Can't hear you back there.
Verse 24 is marking the end of a period of time, the treading down of the Gentiles.
And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
So it's marking a transition from 24 to 25.
What is marking the transition?
Well, the verses 24 is ending a period of time and something new is beginning.
Okay. So,
What's verse 24?
what is verse? I just read verse 24.
Yeah, what?
What is it? Okay, what is verse 24? It's a period of time.
Yeah. 1260.
1260.
Jerusalem shall be trodden down. I don't see Jerusalem being trodden down in the 1260.
Okay, you tell us what the verse is.
I don't know, I'm asking.
You genuinely don't know?
Yeah, I really don't know. I know we can apply that for the...
So you don't see Jerusalem being trodden down in the 1260?
Yeah, I see an application of that.
Go to Revelation chapter 11. Verse 2. But the court which is without the temple leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. So they're treading down Jerusalem for 42 months. You okay with that?
Yeah.
Another verse? But what?
I'm trying to read the same way you want us to read, to see the literal, like what's really talking about.
Okay,
The reason I'm saying this is
okay. We've got to be careful when you say you want to read like I'm saying. I didn't say make anything about literal. I just mean read the words.
Yeah, I know, but like when Matthew 24 talks about to place the abomination of desolation, everybody knows that's talking about the papacy. But you wanted to see that that's placing age 70.
1 second before we move on. I didn't say it was a 1260. She did. And
Yeah.
we'll now shift over to Sister Tess. She can explain her own answer instead of me doing it for her. Because it feels like I've got in the hot seat and I'm not here to defend her. So you say you prove it's the 1260.
Well, verse 23 is the destruction of Jerusalem. Verse 23, the previous verses.
But woe unto them that give suck to children in those days, for there shall be distress in the land and wrath upon this people. So that's
Yeah, the previous few verses.
Okay.
The destruction of Jerusalem.
so that from verse 20 to 23. Is that what you're saying? 20 to 23.
So it's marking the destruction of Jerusalem. And then they're led away into captive, and Jerusalem is trodden down by the Gentiles, but it's trodden down until the times are fulfilled. So if it's a time that has to be fulfilled, it must be a time prophecy. Until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled, and the times is a plural. So if you have 2 times, it's 2 1260s, so it's actually marking 2520. Times is in plural.
Are you okay with all that?
Yeah, I am.
You happy?
Yeah. I
All
am.
done?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you get my question. When we are in Matthew 24, I don't remember which verse that says that he's going to place 15? When he therefore shall be the abomination of desolation. I think everybody agreed that's the papacy.
We didn't discuss it.
Yeah,
Which,
okay,
wait
but
there.
we didn't place that as the papacy.
Just wait there, wait there.
Okay,
Go to the passage. Matthew 24.
verse 15.
So you're saying this is what? The papacy?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think it's the papacy.
Yeah, I know, and I think you don't think it's the papacy
I
because
don't.
verse 16 says, "Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains."
Okay, the reason why I don't think it's the papacy is if you go to Luke 21:20, it's the parallel passage that goes with this one.
Yeah.
And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, it's not Jerusalem. This is not the papacy. This is armies.
Yeah. Okay. So when we see here, so that's one point. But we have the.
Before we go on, tell me why we're having this discussion. Because you said you were happy with her answer. Tell me why we're having the discussion.
Okay, it's because I understand that's the 25:20, but I can't see when we talks about Jerusalem. Anything happened with Jerusalem?
By whom?
Jerusalem being trodden down. I don't know. It's just saying here. I don't see that.
Which verse?
happening. Verse 24. That's the only thing. I know you proved me based upon Revelation 11, verse 2, but I don't see history. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what's going on. But do you see something happened with Jerusalem in the 1260?
Okay, so
I don't know. It's about history. It's just about I don't have any information about that. You see my point?
if we're in from verse 20, Jerusalem's going to be compassed around with armies. We're not going to go into Daniel because Daniel would explain this to us. So we're here in 70. I'll put 66 because that's what the verse is referring to. So 70 is pagan Rome. Pagan Rome's going to go to 538. You okay with that?
Yeah.
So this is pagan. And then from 538 you're going to go to 1798, which is papal. And this is 1260. This is whatever that is, 400 and something years. And in Revelation it talks about the holy city. Yeah? And if we went to Daniel chapter 9, it would say the same thing. It'd say it'd begin here and it would end here. So all the passages are saying is that the holy city is being trampled down from AD 70 to 1798. That's what verse 24. 24?
Yeah, I'm just asking
That's what verse 24 is.
where we see that in history.
Okay, so now you're asking for interpretation of what Jerusalem means.
Yeah.
So
Because in verse 16.
yeah, that's fine, but all I'm saying is this is what the verses teach. This is what they say.
Get that.
So now you're asking a separate question. It's just that you were telling me we're breaking some rule that I devised.
No, yeah, the reason I think it's because in verse 16 it says, "Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains." I think that's very literal. Like if you're in Judea in in AD 70.
Which book we in?
66.
Matthew 24. So
Oh, okay, we swapped. 16. Okay, so if you're in Judea, flee. Yeah.
yeah, that's very literal.
That's Luke 21:21.
Yeah.
Let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains.
So my mindset was let's read this literal, not applying spiritual.
But I never said to read things literally. I just said to read them at face value. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, so if I read this and try to see what's valid, when I go to verse 24, yeah, I don't see that in the same way, but it's just about history, you know.
That's fine. If you don't see it in the same way, but that's not saying that we're using some kind of different rules. Because I never said we have to read it literally. So if we see 7:13 and we talk about clouds, I didn't say it would have to be literal clouds. I just said if it says a cloud, it's a cloud. So I'm not trying to make it literal or symbolic.
Yeah.
But if you want to start explaining this, which we didn't do with most of those passages, that's a different question. I don't know if you see the distinction between that. All the passage says is Jerusalem starts here and ends here. That's what 24 is going to show you. If you drop back to around verse 20, that's all we can pick up. Now if you want to explain what it looks like and what Jerusalem means, then that's a different it's a different issue. Brother Jason.
I was going to ask, what's the difference between literal and face value?
If it says Jerusalem, it's just Jerusalem. That's what that word means. But if we want to say, well, in the controversy, in this history, what does Jerusalem mean? Then we have to decide, is that word being used literally or is that word being used symbolically? That's what I would understand. At face value, it says Jerusalem is all the way through, especially if you tie in Revelation 11, it says the holy city, that it's Jerusalem. But it doesn't tell you what that means. It doesn't tell you what Jerusalem looks like. Is this the Crusades that it's talking about? Is this the Catholic Church and Islam wrestling over that piece of real estate? That we don't know when you go to Revelation 11 or this passage. All we know is that it's talking about Jerusalem. That's all we know.
Okay, yeah, I'm okay. I just thought it was you were going different from the previous verse.
Previous verse?
Yeah.
Which previous verse?
Yeah, I thought that.
Okay.
The verse 15 and 16, I thought we were reading some way and now it's different.
No, all I'm reading is verse 15, 16.
15 of 24, he thought.
I'll go to 20. 20 says Jerusalem, 24 says Jerusalem. They're both talking about Jerusalem. So if you're going to ask me, what does Jerusalem mean here? Jerusalem doesn't mean the same thing here that it means here. They mean different things, but they're both talking about Jerusalem. So I'm saying, Jerusalem here is God's people. It's the church, basically. I was just going to go to another story, but I was reticent to do that. When you go to Daniel 11:45, if you went to there, the glorious holy mountain, Mount Zion, that's what it is. It's using that language. So we'd have to understand that in that context, but then we'd have to make some kind of interpretation about what does it actually mean. Yeah?
But like when we brought up yesterday Mount Zion, where he was standing facing with his hinder parts, do you believe that there has to be first a literal, like he really is in a mountain, or when do you know to jump symbolic? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. So in the book of Joel, my understanding is Joel's talking about some literal history that, even though they're not contending with it at that moment, they're about to. So I'm just going to say he's dealing with his own history. So it's all happening literally. This is literal Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon. They're going to be controlling the land of Israel. I'm not saying Nebuchadnezzar is literally standing in Jerusalem. He doesn't literally stand in Jerusalem because he lives in Babylon. And by the time he's going to be deposed, he's not even alive. It's his grandson. So when my understanding is when we say literally fulfilled, or are these literal mountains, or is it literally happening, the history is always going to be literal, but depending upon the history that's being discussed, then we have to ask ourselves, is all of the language that's being dealt with, is it symbolic language or literal language? So in Joel, I would take that as literal language. They're literally dealing with that geography. But when we come to Daniel 11, Now we're talking about a worldwide phenomena. We're not talking about Israel being the glorious land. Now the whole passage has all become symbolic, but it's all going to be using a storyline that all sounds literal. But the way to tie them up is, I think, the way Daniel asked it, or the way he even expressed it, is that you take the literal language as it's written, which is going to guide and direct you on how to put line upon line together. Because if he didn't say the glorious holy mountain, if he didn't mention a mountain, we wouldn't be able to even tie it back to Joel. But one's talking about literal Jerusalem and one's talking about symbolic Jerusalem. Because we're already in 1798 by the time you get to Daniel. We know Daniel's prophesying about what's going to happen at the end of the world. Sister Olivine.
I wanted to ask about Nebuchadnezzar. Didn't he stand there though, in the time of Zedekiah?
Yeah, he's standing there, but he's not. It's not Nebuchadnezzar that's going to be sent off into the wilderness and stink. It's going to be his grandson. I'll even that. Yeah, at one moment he was literally there.
Yeah.
But Nebuchadnezzar becomes the symbol of Babylon. Daniel chapter 2. Thou, Nebuchadnezzar, art the head of gold.
Yeah.
There's something unique and special about him.
He's the one that brought the kingdom to its height.
And Larry.
I want to ask a question about Matthew 24:15.
Yes.
You said that the abomination of desolation is not the papacy, and I understand the abomination of desolation to represent the Sunday law, and that's directly tied in with the papacy. So I'm wanting to know, when you say you don't think it represents the papacy, I'm not following that.
Matthew 24:15
Yes.
is something that happened nearly 2,000 years ago. It's not the Sunday law. It's not talking about the Sunday law, is it?
You're taking it back. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I got you. Okay.
This is AD 66.
Yes.
If you want to make an application, then it's up for grabs what that would be. Whether it's the papal church, whether it's apostate Protestantism, depending on the dynamic, whether it's the government that the papal church is going to use to do its work for it. You know, people are going to pass laws. We'd have to make some kind of application if we were going to bring it to the end of the world. I'm not saying that we're not supposed to do that, because that's the whole point of all of these three things that make them relevant to us. But how we go about doing that becomes a tricky issue if we're not going to get the original correct. I guess that's what I want us to always be anchored in. Yeah. Again, I'm trying to avoid going into these chapters and breaking them down, because we could spend a long time doing that. Profitable work, but that wasn't the direction in which I was headed. The only reason I wanted to go here, well, I didn't want to go here, Ellen White directed us here in the Great Controversy, and when we were here, I wanted us to just have a cursory look of how we approach Matthew 24, Luke 21. And the reason we're going to do, I wanted to do it, obviously because we're there in the narrative, but as we go through our study, we're going to have to come back to this passage. Why are we going to have to come back here for? I don't know if anybody did, I don't know if I actually set the homework, but if you'd gone back and looked at the first angel's message to the Great Controversy and taken all the passages, if you had done that, then... Sorry? Yeah, I don't think I did, because I only handed it out. If you were to do that, then you'd know the answer to my question. Because the first angel's message is connected to two major Bible passages. You've got Revelation 14. That's first angel's message. Everybody agree with that? And this message is connected to two major stories or chapters, or I don't know how to explain it. What are the two models? If I'll go with models, what are the two models or the two stories that Revelation 14 is connected to? So if you watch France, you know the answer, or if you're there. If you didn't, why didn't you?
Matthew 25.
Matthew 25. And the other one?
24.
13.
Sister Alyssa?
Daniel 8.
Daniel 8. So Daniel 8 and Matthew 24, Matthew 25 are the two stories that are connected to the first, and we'll see this as we read through the Great Controversy. She's going to explain this in excruciating detail. So the only reason we spent some time now looking at Matthew 24 is because I already know we're going to have to come back to Matthew 24 to explain that. So this was sort of just like foundational work. We covered a lot of the things that we need to in Matthew 24. Because Matthew 25 is going to be connected to Matthew 24. That's the only reason we're there. Of course, I said no to Brother Mario. Matthew 24 obviously is Revelation 14. But it's really Matthew 25 that's the premier chapter that deals with that history. Okay, so unless anybody's got any other questions, I'm kind of happy to leave this paragraph, GC 308 paragraph 2. We've looked at the parable. The parable stands separate and distinct from the prophecy. It's repeat and enlarge. I'm saying the prophecy ends in verse 27. I'm saying it's not 1844, October 22nd. Even if you were going to just make that the Millerite history, it wouldn't be. The way we've put this cloud, I don't think you can line up the clouds as a singular event. There's two clouds. There's one in Daniel 7:13 and there's one in Revelation 1:7. And if their history had run its course, they would have had to experience both of those things. And we're going to see that as we go through our study, Lord willing. Okay, so let's come back to GC 309, paragraph 1. But as the spirit of humility and devotion in the church had given place to pride and formalism, love for Christ and faith in his coming had grown cold. Absorbed in worldliness and pleasure-seeking, the professed people of God were blinded to the Saviour's instructions concerning the signs of his appearing. The doctrine of the second advent had been neglected. The scriptures relating to it were obscured by misinterpretation, until it was to a great extent ignored and forgotten. Especially was this the case in the churches of America. The freedom and comfort enjoyed by all classes of society, the ambitious desire for wealth and luxury, begetting an absorbing devotion to money-making, the eager rush for popularity and power, which seemed to be within the reach of all, is that like the great American dream? Led men to centre their interests and hopes on the things of this life, and to put far in the future that solemn day when the present order of things should pass away. So there's a lot in that paragraph, but I want to just pick up a few things. If we were talking about churches, what church does that sound like to you? This church that's absorbed in the things of this earth, fixated about money. Sorry?
Catholic.
Catholic Church?
Mm-hmm.
Laodicea.
Oh, Laodicea too.
The Laodicean church? Did you say that? Someone say something?
Adventist church.
Sorry?
Seventh Adventist.
Bit louder,
The Seventh Adventist
so
church.
they can all hear you.
Yeah.
Seventh-day Adventist church.
Yes.
Sister Alyssa, did you say something?
Laodicea.
Laodicea. It sounds like Laodicea. I think it sounds like Laodicea. Yeah? Is it Laodicea? You said yes? This is Laodicea? The one we just read? Is this Laodicea? You said yes? 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 What does that mean?
Yes.
You're gritting your teeth and saying it like you're full still.
No.
Okay. Brother James? Did you? I thought I heard you say something.
I didn't say anything. I was shaking my head though, so it might have made noise. I don't know.
Clicks.
Just based on the previous paragraph, I would have to say that it isn't Laodicea.
Okay, so it's not Laodicea and it is Laodicea. Why is it not Laodicea?
Well, because Thyatira, we're just coming out of Thyatira,
Because we haven't got to number 7 yet.
based on the last paragraph.
Based on the last paragraph, we're not at number 7 yet. Looks like Laodicea, smells like Laodicea, but it's not Laodicea.
Really?
Sorry?
Really?
Brother James says really, yeah. Really.
And I say no.
Okay, why?
Because the last 3 churches, their histories, you have chronological order for the first 4 sequence, but
You
the
do?
last 3, yeah, they're
Conferring?
Sardis has, yeah.
You can confer. Okay, so we'll do a quick review. First 4 churches. You tell me they're chronological. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes?
Yeah.
Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira. Can you give me dates?
Kinda, yeah.
Sorry?
27 AD.
27?
Yeah. 100. 330.
313?
No.
330?
Yeah. 538.
Yep. You okay with that? You agree with that, Brother Mario?
Yes, sir.
Brother Daniel? All of those numbers you agree with?
I would put 321 instead of 330.
Anything else? Sorry? Brother Greg?
Start Ephesus at the time of the end. Birth of Christ, 4 BC.
No?
Me?
Yep.
I have no problem with 4.
Okay. So, the first 4 churches are chronological. That's what you said.
Yeah.
Then what you're going to do?
And then I'm going to say from 1798, you have the last three kind of just running without fixed date and order. They are together.
Like that?
I would say within Sardis, you have both Philadelphia and Laodicea. So I'm making it a set.
Making what?
Making it a set. Set.
So is that okay like that? You want to draw it differently?
No,
Is that good?
not necessarily. If it paints the picture that, if what I'm saying, if that is how it is painted, fine.
Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that within Sardis, there is Philadelphia and Laodicea.
At the same time?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Brother James?
I wouldn't draw it like that, but I don't know how to defend it. So
How would you draw it? She hasn't defended it.
why?
If you
I
did-
would still put them in order. I mean, they happened very quickly after that, but I would just still put it in order.
Okay, give me dates.
I don't have dates. That's kind of like defending it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Are they a bit of both? They're consecutive still, but they're also parallel because they continue to the end.
End of what?
Well, to our time period, for example. So you've got Sardis being Protestantism, Philadelphia being the Millerites, Laodicea being the Adventist Church. So they still come consecutively, but they continue on to the end.
Protestantism, Milleritism, and SDAs. So you disagree with that, obviously? Or not obviously, but I don't know.
But it's not like that. It's like they're still consecutive because Sardis is first.
Okay, so you,
Philadelphia, see what I'm saying?
you want to do this
Yeah, that's the one.
that way.
Yeah. So it's a bit of both.
I have no problem with the bottom drawing.
But it's not the same as your drawing.
No, I know.
So which one's right?
Remember what I said? I said all three were melded together. So if you want to put it as he has just illustrated it, I have no problem. How the first explanation with Protestantism, Millerism and STA, that would put completely different dates. So even though you have it where you drew my diagram, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay? This one is still different to your one. Who's Laodicea in 1798?
The Protestant,
And who's Sardis in 1798?
same set.
So the Protestants, Sardis and Laodicea at the same time.
The Bible says they have a name.
What name?
But that's it, they have a name.
Which name's that?
Laodicea, Sardis. Laodicea is...
They don't have a name Laodicea.
It says that they are, let me find it, and then I'll tell you.
Find it. Didn't say they have a name Laodicea.
Well, they do. Their name is that they represent themselves as a living people, but they're dead.
3-1, yeah?
Yeah.
But that's not Laodicea, is it? That's Sardis.
Yes.
Okay.
Then but it still says thou has a few that are
Verse 4.
which have not defiled their garments.
Okay.
So
You
that's
said that like, you'll show me some evidence. You'll show me any evidence.
No, but that's my point, that within Sardis you have these classes. Philadelphia is a people that are alive. Their garments are pure.
So if there's anyone in here who's pure, they're also going to be Philadelphia.
No, that's not the description that the Bible gives.
For
any of them, except for Sardis.
So just because someone's unspotted, it makes them Philadelphia?
No.
You just said it did. For Sardis.
I'm saying it is for Sardis, but I'm not saying it is the same thing for everybody across the board.
Okay, but it is for Sardis.
That's how I am reasoning it. No.
And Laodicea?
They're dead.
I'm not asking they're dead. That's not the characteristics of Laodicea.
I know. Laodicea has two characteristics.
One,
Worldliness.
two.
God. Not clear enough. Enough. The first one I did there. They have two characteristics though. They are worldly and
I thought Laodicea means the church that comes under judgment.
if it is a church that comes under judgment, if that's the only characteristics that you're using, then how can you not put Laodicea beginning at 1798?
Because there's no judgment in 1798, that's why.
But it's the I know it is the announcement of the judgment.
No, I said there's no judgment.
Yeah, I know.
So why are you placing them there when there's no judgment?
How can you not?
Because Laodicea means a church that is going to be in judgment, and the judgment hasn't begun yet. Sorry?
That's going to be in.
Because they don't exist at the moment. They can only exist when the judgment begins. Can't be existing pre-judgment because there's no judgment. There's no judgment in 1798. Is there?
No.
You agree with that?
Yes.
So how can you identify a church whose name is the people of judgment when there is no judgment?
The same way I can pull back Ephesus from, if Graham's analogy, which I said I have no problem with, I can take it back from 27 AD to 4 to 4 BC. Then I can pull Laodicea up to 1798.
Why did you mark it as 27? What's your identifier for 27?
Christ.
Christ
Head of
what?
the church.
Sorry?
He began to lay the foundation for the Christian church. In the calling of the five, he laid the foundation for the
And
Christian
who is John
church.
baptizing people into before Christ ever came on the scene? Who's he baptizing people into?
What would be the marker?
Now answer my question.
Wait. No, because I need you to answer my question to answer that.
You didn't ask a
What
question.
would be the marker for putting it at 4 BC?
Yeah, so before we get that one, I said, why did you put 27? You said Christ.
And I said because he laid the foundation for the Christian church.
The foundation isn't where you begin the church. You have to dig a hole before you lay foundation.
But that's a part of your foundation.
It's not.
Yes, it
You're taking
is.
dirt out. That's not part of your foundation. Then I asked the question, what is John baptizing you into? And your answer is nothing, because there's nothing there. And we all know baptism is baptizing into the kingdom of heaven. It's not baptism of repentance. Whether or not John realizes it or not, he's baptizing people into the church, which is pre-27. So once you get forced into that, then you have to say, well, when did it begin? That's the argument about that one. I was ignoring that argument, whatever that one we want to make. You show me where judgment begins, because it doesn't begin before
No, I'm not
1844.
saying judgment begins before.
Then you have to place Laodicea by its name. You can't get away with you using that argument to do your argument. Any comments?
What part of judgment doesn't begin in 1798? Because if you're confronted with the truth, you are judged on your perception of that truth. So are we talking about 1844 executive judgment, or that was the time of judgment, that entire history right there? Am I wrong?
You talking about this? Verses 6 and 7?
1798 where you said there's no judgment there.
Where do you get the term judgment anyway from?
You brought it up just a second ago. You said there is no judgment there.
No, I said this. I said, if you're going to put Laodicea here, Laodicea means judgment. And she says that's fine. And I said there isn't a judgment in 1798. That's all I only said it from that name. So you're asking me, you think there is a judgment in 1798. So if we switch out of, we pull away from the name and we're in this history, 1798, 1844, etc., where are we going to find this concept of judgment being brought to view anyway?
The sanctuary service.
The sanctuary service doesn't identify judgment per se.
The hour of the judgments come.
Yeah, so I pointed to that.
Okay.
Revelation 14, 6 and 7. But that in and of itself is not the sanctuary system where you talk about judgment, unless we're going to, we can argue that the Day of Atonement, we're going to do that. But Revelation 14, fear God, give him glory, for the hour of his judgment is come. Where are we going to place that?
Well, we've always placed it.
Okay, first my two questions. Who's the we? And where have we been placing that? Where have we always placed it?
I'm afraid.
You're going to say 1798? Because I know you're going to say that.
Okay.
And so, when we place in 1798, first of all, we've got to ask ourselves, where did we get that idea from? Did Alan White tell us that? Did John the Revelator tell us that? Where did we pick that up? So, as we get through these passages, the first age message, we're going to see what Alan White says these verses meant, or mean. And once we see what they say, she says, then we can say, okay, whatever she says, we'll say what we want to say. But what we tend to do is we say 1798, obvious, because that's what it is. Until we start looking for the evidence, and I'm not sure if the evidence is there to do that. So, I would argue that Sardis, when you read the passage, has all the characteristics of Laodicea. But it's not Laodicea. It's a different church with its own unique history and its own unique characteristics, which are very similar to Laodicea. Brother Graham said the other day, when we mentioned Thyatira, he mentioned about Pergamos. And he said there's a relationship between Pergamos and Thyatira. And we didn't go into Ephesus and Smyrna, but what's happening during the history of Smyrna? Sorry?
Persecution.
Persecution and Thyatira? Persecution. They're almost the same. Now, the cause of that persecution is markedly different. I presume we all have some kind of idea of that. This is faithfulness, persecution. This is compromise and persecution. But they're both being persecuted. So the fact that we see characteristics of what looks like Laodicea in the passage we've just read, in this Millerite line, I don't think makes it Laodicea. We spoke about this subject at the beginning of the class, and I directed us sort of vaguely to Testimonies of the Church Volume 1, I can't remember the page, and you can clearly mark that Ellen White around 1857 is already calling the church Laodicea by that stage. You can trace, sorry?
1T, page 141.
141. You can trace back James White, I presume he's the writer of this, that he's talking about the church being Laodicea in 1850. So I personally mark Laodicea as coming in 1850. Some people might argue 1844, but I don't think you can get it earlier than 1844, just from its name. And not only that, when you start going to early writings and you see the structure of how that book is put together, Spiritual Gifts Volume 1, you begin to see what Laodicea actually is. So, I don't want to go too far into that subject, but I'm arguing that Laodicea is not Millerite history. It's its own unique separate history, and if I know we're not all okay with that, but I don't want to get, we'll end up spending a couple of classes trying to show why I'm saying that, which I'm trying to avoid doing. But they're in this worldliness, and the love for Christ and faith in his coming had grown cold, absorbed in worldliness, pleasure seeking. People of God were blinded to the Saviour's instructions concerning the signs of his appearing. The doctrine of the second advent had been neglected. The scriptures relating to it were obscured by misinterpretation until it was to a great extent ignored and forgotten. I want to go to the last sentence. Actually, it's a really long sentence. I want to cut into that sentence. Are we all there where it says led men? Yep. Led men to centre their interests and hopes on the things of this life, this bit now, and to put far in the future that solemn day when the present order of things should pass away. Okay, it's that bit there. What is that? That's code language for what? We're in Millerite history. You've got to know a little bit about Millerite history to know the answer to this. They're going to put far into the future that solemn day when the present order of things should pass away. What is that code word for? What doctrine is that? This is the millennium. This is the millennium doctrine. I'm suggesting, and if you once someone says that's what it is, I don't know if you can read that into that. Yeah, I think that's I think that's a fair assumption. So this worldliness that's being brought to view here, where did it come from? Why are all these people so worldly? Just they get
rich.
Sorry?
They want to get.
They just want to get rich. They just sort of like say, we want to be nice people. We just want to get rich.
They've been taught and seduced by Jezebel.
Louder, please.
So we're going to go to where we're going to go to? Revelation 2. 20. Going to go to Revelation 2:20. Notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, Thyatira, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. So we discussed this already. I can't remember the context in when we brought this up. Can anybody remember? So we can why did we read this earlier, a couple of days ago? Sorry? Yes, I remember. You're right, it was about the kings. It was Revelation 12. Revelation 12, the serpent and the dragon. Remember that? And we weren't sure what was what. And then Sister Tess said, is it verse 6 maybe? She says that Satan is identified, not verse 6, verse 9, she says that Satan is identified as a dragon and a serpent. Singular person has got two identities, which is the priest king, which is church and state. That's the argument that we're going to develop. and we're saying the dragon is state and the serpent is church, and then we looked at the persecution that's coming on both of them. The dragon is obvious, it's got his sword, wants to kill people, but the serpent is a bit more subtle. And then we went to Revelation 2:20 to see that in that same history, Thyatira, the persecution that the serpent is bringing is teaching and seduction. Are we okay with that? That's just a quick refresher of why we looked at that. Okay, so now we're looking at Millerite history. We're here in Sardis, and these people are worldly. My question is, why are they worldly? And I'm saying that worldliness is connected to the last part of the last sentence, which is this millennial doctrine, not judgment, this millennial doctrine. And so I'm saying their worldliness, where did it stem from? Did they just become like worldly? Sister Alyssa is saying no. This worldliness stemmed from Jezebel. Jezebel is the one that's seduced them into worldliness. And Jezebel is here. So this history of Jezebel, Thyatira, the Dark Ages, is going to create a culture or an atmosphere in the church that's going to produce an effect here in the Millerite line when Sardis comes. And what is Sardis? About the name, Sister Olivine, what is Sardis? Not just called out, because the called out one is not the one you're going to find in Scripture.
Red.
Okay, so what does red mean? Just briefly. It's in the name. You have a name that you're alive,
but you're dead.
But you're dead. So their name that they're alive. What does it mean if you're alive? Where were you? Okay, if you're alive, you're not in the grave. I'll just put it simply like that. You're not in the grave, okay? So I'm going to use this idea. You can't get it straight from here, but they're resurrected. Okay, so I'm going to say that. So if they're resurrected, what were they here? They were dead. And if you're dead, where are you? In the grave. So here they are in this grave, dead, and they're going to be resurrected here in 1798, the time of the end. So there's another story that talks about people that are in the grave and that they're going to be taken out of the grave and resurrected. Where's that? Ezekiel 37. So Ezekiel 37, when you're in the grave, where are you? You're here. This is the grave experience. And you're going to come out of the grave here. If we're okay with that. So the grave is what? Grave equals? Captivity. Babylon. You're dead. Now, Sardis was supposed to, when it came out, they were supposed to be alive. But they're not alive. They've only got a name that says they're alive. They're dead. Why are they still dead?
No breath.
Because they've got no breath. They're still dead because here they were taught and seduced to hold on to doctrines that they're still holding on to. And what is that doctrine? That premier one that we just mentioned?
Millennium.
The millennium. So what I want us to see is that this worldliness that they're experiencing, that they're living, is not just people who are bad Christians, you know, in and of themselves. This is something that's been pushed upon them, forced upon them, if you like, and it's a doctrinal problem. It's not a moral problem. Does that make sense? When people become worldly, they don't become worldly because they become immoral. They become worldly because they hold on to false doctrines. Who gave them that false doctrine? Jezebel. Now, this thought... Okay, so hold on to that thought. We read Luther. We targeted the date 1540. He said in 300 years Christ is coming back. That takes you to where? 1840. So does Luther believe in the millennial doctrine? He doesn't. Maybe I should call it I'll call it the millennial. He doesn't believe in that. Why would he not believe in that? Because he's part of what? He's part of the Reformation. What comes after the Reformation? The something Reformation. The Counter-Reformation. The Counter-Reformation is what? It's a Catholic attack upon God's people. And who are the people who are going to instigate, perfect, prosecute the Counter-Reformation? The Jesuits. The Jesuits. Now we begin to see why 1773 is important. Because what you have to do first, before you can get Sardis to come up, you have to get rid of the Jesuits and the Counter-Reformation. Did that sort of piece of the puzzle fit? Yeah? So not only have we got the United States, 1773, Boston Tea Party, we've got the Jesuits coming out. The Jesuits have to be ejected out of the story because they're the instigators of the Counter-Reformation. But by the time they've been thrown out, it's too late. The doctrine has been fully absorbed, fully imbibed into God's church here. It was taught and seduced, so now it's fully imbibed. So by the time you get to 1798, there are people that have come out of their graves. They're red. Red means life. Red means humanity. So when they're alive, they're still dead because they're still holding to the premier doctrine that they were taught and seduced, which is the millennial doctrine. And the millennial doctrine says what? I've seen your hands. It says, put far into the future the solemn day when the present order of things should pass away. So everything's going to change right in the distance. And what's William Miller saying? It's right now.
Yeah.
And what's his argument? What's his argument? Not Revelation 14. What's his argument?
Daniel 8.
Sorry? Daniel 8. His argument is Daniel 8. Daniel 8 is a message based on time. So the argument that they're fighting over is the doctrine of time. The Counter-Reformation, the Jesuits, have introduced a teaching into the church which says there is no time. And if you don't believe in time, what experience do you have? Obviously worldliness, but it's Sardis. What experience do you have?
Dead.
You're dead. What makes you come alive?
Breath, word, prophecy.
Time.
Prophecy.
Yes. Specifically time. The doctrine of time is what makes you come alive. And that's what's being discussed here in 309 paragraph 1. If you just read 309 paragraph 1, you'd never get that, I don't think. Now, I'm sure we've all read it before, we've all read great controversy. You read it and you just don't see it till you start digging into it. And for me, when you start seeing that and plus start laying it on the line, you begin to see the significance of what the Millerites were dealing with and the warfare that they had to prosecute. Bob.
I just wanted to add that if you look at the Jesuits in 1773, they already done their work. They were doing their work against the Reformation. And in 1773, when Pope Clement the 14th or whatever his name was, suppressed the Jesuits, if you look at the history, you find out that there were 2 nations that didn't comply with that. So the Jesuit activity was never suppressed, and that was in the United States and Russia. The Jesuit activity was not curtailed at all.
Sorry?
asking about John Paul's work with the Jesuits. He had abolished their order.
Yes, there's been a great struggle between the Jesuits and the Papal Church. We know that.
So I was asking the date. I don't remember, so that's what I was asking.
Of
when John, because it came to mind before Brother Bob said it. I was asking, when did John Paul abolish the Jesuit order?
Okay.
Because it would tie in nicely with 1773 and our history.
I don't know off the top of my head. We know we've got the first Jesuit Pope though, don't we?
I'm trying to remember if it is, if it is
We do.
1982.
I don't know, you can tell us when you find out.
Yeah.
Sister Robin?
He said Martin Luther, he's the Reformation, he rises up, he believes in 300 years, things are going to wrap up. That wasn't the primary thing he was teaching though. So when the Jesuits come, they're not necessarily teaching against, you said they were teaching against it. He wasn't really setting time.
No.
He was just bringing a reformation.
The only point I was trying to make in that statement was that part of the Counter-Reformation is to bury prophetic truth. They're coming on multiple points, but by the time you get to 1798, the thing that the premier doctrine that's going to come to light is this issue of time. It's the millennium that the Millerites are fighting against. That's what they're. It's the premier Catholic doctrine. They have three doctrines. That's what the premier one is the issue of the millennium. The other two is State of the Dead and Sunday.
Just ever so briefly, I want to say that the reason why the Jesuits even came up with this millennial idea, you know, putting it in the future, is because at one point during about the 1500s, there were several times in the Catholic history where there were rival popes, and there were rival popes, each calling each other the Antichrist. And they were trying to get rid of that stigma. And so in order to do that, they had to either say that the Antichrist was something that was already way in the past, Antiochus Epiphanes, or it had to be something way in the future to dismiss that. And so this millennial doctrine was written, and it sat in some Oxford universities in Europe for a period of time. And then you had a guy named Darby who was over there studying it, and he dusted this thing off and thought it was the best interpretation he ever saw. And he's the one who brought it to the United States, and he shared it with Dwight L. Moody, and he shared it with a guy named Schofield. And Schofield was the one who wrote a Bible called the Schofield Bible, and he put all these study aids in there, embedding all of this stuff about this millennial doctrine in the Bible. And so that's why you have most of Protestant America have been inculcated with this for a long time.
Moody?
Dwight L. Moody and Schofield. And that's about as much of it as I know, but I know that much.
The reason why Luther knows it's 300 years is because of what? What's he using to calculate 300?
The 1260.
He's using the 1260 because he knows it's the Antichrist. So the story that Brother Bob has just given us ties in right with that. If you need to get rid of who the Antichrist is because it's connected to 1260, and that's what's happening here in this history. Even though the Millerites now are not even going to be dealing with the Antichrist, they don't even care about that. They're using this for a totally different purpose. When they're going to draw in Daniel 8, they're thinking about something different. So I think that gives a much better picture of what the Counter-Reformation is. And even though Luther's primary argument isn't time, it is the Antichrist, or it morphs into the Antichrist, even though his was justification by faith. because when they start attacking him, he's saying, well, I've got justification to separate from you because you are the Antichrist. Therefore, you have to be connected to 1260, which is why he can get time. If you get rid of the Antichrist, you get rid of the 1260. So I like that answer. Brother Daniel.
I think Great Controversy 309.3, just 2 paragraphs below. It's interesting that says, if therefore thou shalt not what, I will come unto thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know that what hour I will come upon thee. So the Millerites, they knew the hour, and Sardis, they don't know, that's why they're dead. And I think we should read since the paragraph begins. The condition, can you read?
Yep, I'm just going to go, I'll read the paragraph before and this one. Okay. So I'm okay, I'm done with 309, paragraph 1. Unless anybody's got any questions. It talks about the worldliness, and it talks about the millennial doctrine, and I've tried to explain, like conceptually, how it fits into the story that we've had, and we've tied in again the story of the Jesuits, the Counter-Reformation. So this condition is not moral. That's the point I want to pick up. Obviously, it becomes a moral issue because they're just worldly, but it stems from doctrinal errors. I don't know if we're going to have time this semester to do this, so I'll just add it in here. If that is the case, it's not a proof, but it can be proven, I can prove it. If this is the case, this problem in morality that stems from doctrinal problems, when you come to Laodicea, and so I'm arguing Laodicea is post-Millerite history, their condition is exactly the same as you find in the Millerite history. Sardis and Laodicea have very similar characteristics. It's all worldliness. So what produces our worldliness? Why did we become Laodicea? The answer is, it's not just because we became immoral, it's because of a doctrinal issue. So it's a doctrinal issue that produces this experience. And all you need to do is just trace back what happened between Thyatira and Sardis, and you'll see what's going to happen, or how we're going to get into Laodicea. All of this is going to come back into play, and just to say it succinctly, the reason we're in Laodicea is because someone has attacked us. And who is that? James White attacked us. No, James White did not attack us. No, he did not attack us.
The Protestants.
Satan.
Satan is too vague.
Wine of Babylon.
Catholic Church. Right?
Not Protestantism?
I would say, even if you're going to mark Protestantism, I say it's the Catholic Church. They're the ones that have attacked us. And that's what has brought us into the Laodicean condition. It's not just some kind of, let's become worldly because we like our houses. It was a doctrinal attack. And if you see what the doctrinal attack was by the Jesuits, it was what? No time. Ditch time. And that's what's going to happen to us. We're going to ditch time because we've been attacked by the Catholics. Jezebel, if it's a more palatable way of expressing that. Okay. Next paragraph.
Excuse me, Brother Parminder. If you use Jezebel, as in the Catholic Church, will you be forced to use the Jesuits again? Why I'm asking is, you know, like within our church, most times things happen. We say there's a Jesuit, and the Jesuits did it. The Jesuits did it. That's kind of the answer within the church. We'll say this person high ranking in the church is a Jesuit. Haven't you heard that? Where the Jesuits is the answer for all our problems as Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah, but every time I hear it in the movement, I try and stamp on it.
No, that's why I'm asking for you to just, because if we say, okay, it's the Catholic Church, remember we just defined the persons that the Catholic Church used for the Counter-Reformation. They were the Jesuits. And again, we say it is the Catholic Church that attacked the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Who did they use?
You'd have to identify who the Jesuits are, wouldn't you? And the Jesuits are the armies of Rome. Last time I checked. Okay? 309 paragraph 2. There's no Jesuits in our church. When the Saviour pointed out to his followers the signs of his return, he foretold the state of backsliding that would exist just prior to his second advent. There would be, as in the days of Noah, the activity and stir of worldly business, pleasure seeking, buying, selling, planting, building, marrying and giving in marriage, with forgetfulness of God and the future life. For those living at this time, Christ's admonition is, take heed to yourself, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. Watch ye therefore and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. Luke 21, 34 to 36. So we know that this is after the parable of the fig tree. It's just a couple of verses later. The next paragraph is going to talk about what we've just read. The condition of the church at this time that we've just read about is pointed out in the Saviour's words in Revelation. Thou hast a name that thou livest and art dead. And to those who refuse to arouse from their careless security, the solemn warning is addressed. If therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come on thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know the hour, and thou shalt not know what hour I come upon thee. Okay, so we went back 309 paragraph 1. We're here. We've identified that it's Sardis. I'm arguing that it is Sardis, it's not Laodicea. We've talked about the back history of how you go from Thyatira to Sardis. We briefly mentioned, very briefly, Ezekiel 37. Always dangerous to do that, because all we've done is just pulled that out, made some ad hoc application without going back and checking exactly what the original context was. But we have done that in other places, and it is okay to do that, which is why I just dropped it in. Now we're in this one. It says, when the Saviour pointed out to his followers the signs of his return, he foretold the state of backsliding that would exist just prior to his second advent. This is Millerite history. I'm arguing this is Millerite history. Explains all about the condition again. And then it says, Luke 21, 34 to 36. Take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be overcharged. We should pray without ceasing, that we may be accounted worthy to escape all things that shall come to pass, and stand before the Son of Man. What does it mean to stand before the Son of Man? Sorry?
Judgment.
Judgment. Which judgment is that? When you stand before the Son of Man.
Executive, investigative.
Investigative judgment. And if we're happy with about that, investigative judgment. Any other answers?
Second coming.
Second coming. Executive judgment.
Well, yeah.
Or you just don't want to make any judgment in that. You just want to say it's just second
Well,
coming.
at the second coming, you have to stand in that day. Jesus is going to come and the wicked are going to be destroyed. You wouldn't be. But I'm not sure if that's what it's referring to. But.
Okay. In Millerite history, where would you be standing here? October? October 22 or post October 22, somewhere in that history. If we're okay with that. The condition of the church at this time is pointed out in the Saviour's words in the Revelation. thou that livest and art dead. What's that? Revelation
Sardis.
3:1. Remember
Yeah.
that? So this is Sardis. So she's specifically pointing out that everything that we've read in the last 2 paragraphs is the condition of Sardis. Those who refuse to arouse from their careless security, and to those who refuse to arouse from their careless security, the solemn warning is addressed. If therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come on thee as a thief in the night, and you won't know the hour when I'm coming. So, to those who refuse to arouse from their careless security, who's that? Who are those that did arouse from their careless security? It's the Millerites. This is the people, how does it say in Revelation 3? Verse 4, thou hast a few names even in Sardis which have not defiled their garments, and they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. So there's this group of people in Sardis who have aroused from their careless security. They've got white garments. These are the virgins, if we want to place them in Matthew 25, they're in white. And to the others, the careless people, who didn't arouse from their carelessness, what are they not going to know? They're not going to know the hour when Christ is coming. Someone said? When judgment. So it says, I will come on thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know what hour I will come upon thee. And if I'm not mistaken, Brother Daniel wanted to pick up this passage in connection with, to put far into the future the solemn day and say this is about time. The argument is about time, and he's used, and I was going to say he's using it, but Ellen White is using this, the way she's structured this, that this is a message on time when it says thou shalt not know the hour. Again, I don't think you have to read too much into it, but a surface reading you just miss this. The implications of what it means. Any questions? Okay, we'll read this next paragraph, but we won't comment on it because it's quite lengthy. It was needful that men should be awakened to their danger, that they should be aroused to prepare for the solemn events connected with the close of probation. The prophet of God declares, the day of the Lord is great and very terrible, and who can abide it? Who shall stand when he appeareth? Who is of purer eyes than to behold evil, and cannot look on iniquity? To them that cry, my God, we know thee, yet have transgressed his covenant, and hastened after another God, hiding iniquity in their hearts, and loving the paths of unrighteousness, to these the day of the Lord is darkness and not light, even very dark, and no brightness in it. It shall come to pass at that time, saith the Lord, that I will search Jerusalem with candles, and punish the men that are settled upon their lees, that say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, neither will he do evil. I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and I will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. Neither their silver nor their gold shall be able to deliver them. Their goods shall become a booty, and their houses a desolation. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and mercy. It's my hope and prayer, Lord, that the Millerite history, a reform line that we're all familiar with, is beginning to take shape and beginning to become clearer in our minds. Not so much the dates, and the waymarks that are attached to them, but different thoughts, different ideas, different concepts that have significance to us here at the end of the world. We ask and pray, Lord, for continued guidance and direction in Jesus' name. Amen.